present as well. We are outside the presence of the jury. Are you ready for the jury, Ms. Pearson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. King?
Judge.
All right, thank you. Let's bring the jury in, please. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect that the jury is back in the courtroom. Right before the break, Ms. Pearson was direct examining Agent Higashi. And Agent, I will remind you that you are still under oath. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Pearson, you may proceed with your direct examination of Agent Higashi.
Agent Higashi, before we get to your results in this case, I would like to talk about firearms and ammunition and how firearms work.
Okay.
And if you could step down. And turn on the mic there. There it is. There you go. Okay. Now, today you've brought with you some firearms that are either like what we recovered in this case or of the same type. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So let's start with the shotgun first. And I want to show you first, did you examine the shotgun that was seized in this case, which is People's Exhibit 277, that was previously admitted and identified?
Which was?
Previously admitted and identified as the shotgun seized in this case. Is that A70? Okay.
Yes, it is.
And if you could hold that up, and then
Okay.
just one
For
moment.
the jury? Or?
Yeah, just for the
Okay.
jury, just one moment. And if you could then also hold up the one that you've brought with us today, which you've indicated you've made safe. It doesn't have a firing pin, so it can't fire. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I removed the firing pin from this shotgun, so it is incapable of firing.
And would using the guns that you brought today help you to explain your testimony to the jury about how firearms work?
Yes, it would.
Now, looking at what we seized in this case is People's Exhibit 277 and the Remington 870 that you brought with you today. Are these the same type of shotgun?
Yes, they are. The action mechanism here in the receiver, they're the same, have the same function, different, slightly different furniture on it, and the one that I was given to examine had a 6-round magazine, so the magazine extends a little further, but everything else about it will function the same.
The way that it loads, fires, would all be the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, starting out with a shotgun, we've seen, obviously, magazines for some of our other firearms. We don't see a magazine that protrudes from a shotgun.
Correct. Well, this is the magazine tube. So it's a tube under the barrel, serves as the magazine.
So what do you have to do to load a shotgun with ammunition?
Okay. First of all, the pump has to be forward. That allows access to the magazine tube here on the bottom. So in the bottom of the receiver, there's a cutout with a little lifter. And some of you can probably see that. There's a bright orange button there that shows the user that we have an unloaded shotgun.
You've used the term receiver. What does that mean?
That's the middle section of the shotgun here that has the trigger group, and it has some other mechanisms in here that allow, it's elevator mechanism, so it will allow the shot shell from the magazine to go up into this little receiver area, and then as you push the slide forward, it'll take that round and put it in the chamber of the shotgun.
Did you bring with you what are dummy rounds
Yes, I
for
did.
shotgun shells?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you could show us then how you would load a shotgun.
Okay.
Now these, I can hold them for you if you like.
Thank you, Karen.
These orange shells, is there anything in them?
No, these are hollow plastic orange, but they're the same outside diameter of a regular 12-gauge shot shell.
And if you have shotgun shells, you buy those separately.
Yes, ma'am.
And then how do you load them into a shotgun?
Okay. So they're simply put in the bottom portion of the receiver here and into the magazine tube. This particular one will hold 4 in there.
How many does Exhibit 277, the shotgun seized in this case, how many shot shells did it hold?
That one will hold 6 in the tube here.
Once you've loaded the shells into the shotgun, what do you do next if you want
Okay.
to fire a gun?
Since the shotgun right now is locked, one, you could pull the trigger. That would help release the pump. Or there's a little lever here on the left side of the trigger that will also release the slide. So you would pull it to the rear. That round from the magazine is now in a position to where if the slide is closed, now this is has chambered around from the magazine. The gun or the shotgun could then be fired.
So the word chamber around, what does that mean?
That just means taking a round from the magazine tube and placing it in the chamber or the barrel end of the shotgun, and it is now ready to be fired.
So you had to load the shells and
into the magazine tube.
and then you had to pull back the
Yes.
pump?
Retract the pump. That allowed it to come into this area here, and then the elevator would then make it pointing into the chamber of the barrel, and then when the slide is pulled forward, would chamber that round.
So now a round is chambered. Is this shotgun ready to fire?
Yes.
And once you fire the first round,
Okay.
are you able to do that?
Yes.
Now, under normal circumstances, would the shotgun shell fall out of the shotgun?
No, ma'am. It would be just like it is now. It would still be in the chamber. You would have to manually work the pump to extract and eject the fired casing if it had fired.
So now let's say you fired it once.
Okay.
What do you do next?
You pull the same pump to the rear, causes that shell to fall out. The next round is in the elevator system, ready to be loaded into the chamber. So once the slide is pushed forward, it chambers the next round.
And then you fire your second round,
Fire the second round. Oops.
and you have to pull back in order to
Right,
eject
you have
that
to
casing.
eject that back. And normally, this would be shouldered or level, and then back forward.
When a casing is ejected, a shotgun shell casing is ejected, how far does it go?
It goes back as far as one would operate the pump, but generally not very far because it's manually operated, as differentiated from the rifle or the pistol where it's under the force of the firing process. So this is a manual extraction, so it depends on the force you apply to it.
So firearm in this case, the shotgun in this case, Exhibit 277, when you have this at shoulder level and the shotgun shell is being ejected, how far would you guess it would go? Where would it land? And what direction does it go to?
Well, since the port is on the right side, it will probably go about 5 feet or so to the right.
Okay. And if you could do this one more time, please. Okay. Now, shotgun shells, we've seen previously admitted BBs
Yes.
that are from shotgun shells.
Yes.
How many BBs were in the shotgun shells that were fired in this case?
The loads that were fired, I had to calculate it out because I couldn't find any of those at any of the local stores. So the calculated number was 100 separate BB shot in each round fired.
Does that tend to be an accurate number, or is there a plus or minus on a 100 shot round?
I'm going to say that it's probably 100 when they do that, because they load to a weight. That's how many 177 size BB shots are in that particular load.
How fast does a shotgun round travel?
That particular load is listed at 1,300 feet per second.
And can you compare that to something like the speed of sound?
Speed of sound is about almost 1,100 feet per second, so it's a little faster than that. The 40 Smith & Wesson typical bullet's about 1,100 feet per second. So again, the payload is traveling at a pretty high velocity.
From the shotgun?
From the shotgun.
And while you're still here, I'm going to show you People's Exhibit 1228.
Okay.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that something that you created?
Yes, it is.
And is that a shotgun shell?
Yes, this is a similar load, something that I could find at one of the local stores. It was a little lighter in weight, so I think this one had 94 pieces of shot in it, but it had a much higher velocity. So this one's rated at 1,700 feet per second.
Would this be useful to help explain how a shotgun shell is made?
Yeah, it just shows the separate components that go into a shot shell. Not only the powder, but we have a wadding that holds the shot and protects the inside of the barrel. So when the payload is going down the barrel, it's this plastic wad that contains all of the 100 pieces of steel shot. That goes out of the barrel of the shotgun. And
if, Your Honor, I would move to use Exhibit 1228 as a demonstrative exhibit.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, I wanted to mark it as that. I want to show it then to the jury using it on the Elmo. So.
Any objection? No. Okay. The request is granted without objection.
And if you could, I guess for this moment, maybe I can have you either look at the screen. If we could pull up 1228 on the Elmo and show it. And is that with the light off? Okay. If you could tell us, what are we looking at in this exhibit?
okay, I'll use the pointer. Sorry. In the exhibit, here's basically a window cutout of how it looks in real life. The wadding is up here, takes up most of the green plastic area. Up here is where the loose wad is, and it's pretty sizable, and it's got a little plastic tail on the bottom. All the shot, there's 94 pieces here, all that would be loaded into this area of the wad. That's the powder payload of what drives the wad and the shot out. So it just helps kind of give you in mind's eye what is going on inside of a shot shell.
And to the left there, what we're looking at is gunpowder?
Yes, the gray pieces in the Ziploc bag is gunpowder.
And if I could have up previously admitted exhibit 2932, it's a photograph. Now, you were talking about shotgun wadding. Is this shotgun wadding?
Yes.
And is this what we saw in the in that shell? And if you can explain now, looking at this picture, how does the shotgun wadding, how does it work? What is it doing?
So this is the bottom portion of this. The other one, out of the one in the exhibit, has a little tail, and that might be because it's a higher velocity load. So this one has basically just a flat cup area. This acts as a piston. So when the gunpowder explodes, that will help fill the bore, seal the gases, and help propel the payload down the barrel. You can see some of the imprints of the BB shot when it's going down the barrel of the firearm and under this tremendous pressure. The BB shot will impress itself into the wad, so sometimes that's what we can use to help determine the type of shot that was fired in it based on the dimple that's left. In this case, we happen to have the dimples as well as the fired shot itself. But this is what happens. It has, it's scored or has little fingers on it. So as soon as it clears the barrel, the fingers will start to open up. It's a much lighter weight than all the BBs. So the BBs have all the momentum. They will go forward. This thing will act kind of like a parachute where it'll open up, the fingers will cause it to stop, and it'll tend to go off target as you get away from, the further away from the shotgun. It deviates from its target because these pedals don't open up perfectly, so they will tend to rotate and deviate off the true flight path of all the pellets.
And could we see 2934, please, which is also previously admitted? Does this show one that landed the opposite direction?
Yes, this one shows with the base down and how wide the fingers of the pedals have opened up. But again, you can still see the imprint of the payload on the base as well as the sides of the wad.
Okay. And did you, in this case, look at People's Exhibit 277, the shotgun, and were you able to determine whether that shotgun was fully functional?
Yes, it was a fully functional firearm and was capable of inflicting serious injury or death.
Let's next talk about the rifle. Did you bring a rifle today?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to put this one on the floor for the moment. Now, did you also examine People's Exhibit 706, which is the Smith & Wesson MP15?
Yes, I did.
And did you bring a rifle today as well?
There's the exhibit. And yes, I did bring a rifle.
If you could tell us how the rifle that you brought is the same and how it's different,
Okay.
and would using the rifle help you to illustrate how you load and fire a rifle?
Yes, it would. So this is one of our duty rifles that we have at CBI. Similarly is the collapsible stock. It's adjustable. This becomes important for our guys when they have their vest on. Usually you want it shorter because you have this football type pad on. So it has adjustability on that.
Let's see here. On this one, the one that you brought looks like it's shorter than People's
Yes,
Exhibit 706?
We also have a shorter barrel. This helps it fit in our vehicles versus normally. So this is a 14.5-inch barrel. The one I examined was a 16-inch barrel. The big difference is this one has a roll mark that says Colt. The evidence item was a Smith & Wesson. Same design, same exact everything. All the parts would interchange with each other, so there's more similarities than differences. The big difference is the roll mark. This is a different brand, but they all are designed similarly. They all function very similarly also.
Now, I presume that the first thing you'd have to do in order to fire this would be to insert a loaded magazine into it.
Yes, that is correct. As it sits now, it is a very safe weapon.
And it has no firing pin in it, no ammunition in it, it cannot fire in this
That
courtroom.
is correct, yes.
Did you bring a magazine that would fit into this rifle with you today?
Yes, I did, and I also brought inert or dummy rounds that we use in training. The bright orange tip helps us know users as well as the instructors that we have some dummy ammunition, and the bright orange also helps when we have to pick them up at the range.
I would first like for you to load a magazine, if you would, so that we could see how that's done.
So this magazine is a normal 30-round capacity. It's designed to hold 30 rounds of .223 or 5.56 ammunition.
And before you go any further, will you explain the difference between, .223 and .556?
The difference is very slight. The 5.56 is the military designation. The lead of the barrels are slightly different. For all intents and purposes, they're the same thing. You can use 5.56 ammo you can use .223 Remington ammo, which would be commercial ammunition, in either of these firearms. There is some issue possibly with using 5.56 ammunition in a .223 rifle. So generally use the .223 Remington. That's what we use in our training, and most of our as for duty ammunition, that's what our specs have. But 5.56 ammo in a 5.56 rifle will work perfectly also.
In this case, was the ammunition seized .223 or 5.56?
It's 5.56.
Okay. Now, looking at the top of this magazine, it looks like it has a bullet in it, but that's not?
No, that's part of the magazine part called the follower. This just helps. There's a big spring in here that's all coiled up, and all this simply does is go up and down. So if you load a number of rounds in it, it'll compress the spring, and as the rifle or the user inserts ammunition into the gun, the spring will uncoil and move upward. There's also a part on here that will help lock the gun open when it's empty, so the user knows I need to reload. But in this particular case, we'll just load some ammo, I guess, right?
And how many rounds does this magazine hold?
This magazine with this follower is designed to hold 30 rounds of ammunition.
Did you examine 30-round magazines in this case?
There were, I think, 3 30-round magazines that were submitted, but quite a few of them were 40-rounders or 100-rounders.
So if you would show us how you load ammunition into a magazine.
All it is simply placing it, there's some feed lips in the back half of the magazine, so you want to put them down right there so they seat in the back, and this will be done. Just easily insert them.
Now there's a spring in there. Is it hard to push the ammunition down onto the spring?
No, not quite yet. When we get down to about 28 or 29, it'll get a little more difficult. But for now, it just goes in very simply.
And you have to load it one bullet at a time.
One bullet at a time, unless you have stripper clips that you can have 10 rounds on a stripper clip, and this little tool that can help insert them rather quickly, but we don't have that here.
Is loading a magazine something that is easier for you because you've been doing it for, I'm guessing, decades, as opposed to somebody who hasn't been doing it so long?
This particular magazine loads rather easily. The pistol magazine's a little more challenging because of you're fighting a spring that compresses a lot quicker. So this one's actually fairly simple. Am I going all the way to capacity?
Yes.
Okay. Let's speed this up then.
How many rounds now magazines this size, are they used by law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
How many rounds does law enforcement load in a 30-round magazine?
At our agency, we normally go with 28 because there's sometimes a problem if there's 30 rounds in the magazine, even though you load it to capacity. If you try and load it into your rifle when the bolt is forward or in a particular condition I'll show you, the magazine won't lock up reliably, and that can be a big problem that we have out on the range which would translate to a really bad problem out in the field if the agent had to reload his gun and was unable to seat the magazine.
Can you load more than 30 rounds into a 30-round magazine?
Not with this particular follower. With there's a company that used to be in Colorado, Magpul. They make a follower that you can put into a normal 30-round magazine, and with those you can fit 31 rounds. But just because you can fit 31 doesn't mean you should. I have failed because I wasn't counting. I know I'm getting close because
So
what
it's
I
best
normally
to
do is
count out the
push-
bullets first.
Yes. I think we were at capacity now. So there you go. The 31st round will not fit
Okay.
in the magazine.
So now this magazine has 30 rounds in it, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay. So now you've loaded your magazine. What do you do now to load your rifle?
Okay, so this is intuitive to me, but you have to, bullets are going forward towards the bad people. If you try and do this with the bolt is forward,
So show us where the bolt is.
of course it went in. So the bolt is this portion of the rifle. So right now this is actually seated.
And when you use the word seated, is it's seat, S-E-A-T?
S-E-A-T. So
Seated.
when we load our rifles, you insert the magazine, but you also give it a tug, because if it's not fully seated, which sometimes it can be, where it looks like it's seated, you may get the dreaded click and nothing, and then when you go to pull the charging handle back, the magazine usually falls out. So that's a good way to know you're not fully seated. So I'll put it back in.
So once you've gotten the magazine into the rifle, what do you do next?
The best way to do it with this rifle is on the top here, there's a thing called the charging handle with a little latch here. So once you grab this, you pull it to the rear. That pulls the bolt carrier to the rear, and then you just let it go. You slingshot it forward. That'll take the top round of ammunition from the magazine, load it into the chamber, and this gun has a safety lever here. Safe is horizontal, vertical for the fire position.
And the safety would prevent you from firing if it's on safety rather than fire?
Correct. A lot of times if we are trying to engage a target and nothing's happening, the trigger's blocked, then training will kick in and know that we have to push the safety in the on position, or the fire position.
So now is this ready to fire?
Yes, it is.
And if you when it fires around, will it kick out a casing?
Yes, this is a semi-automatic design, so the pressure that will push the bullet down the barrel of the firearm, the bullet will exit the barrel. In the front sight base, there's a little hole in the barrel. That's how the gas system operates. So the gas system will come up this tube that runs along the top portion of the rifle here and interact with the bolt carrier group, where it will basically push the bolt to the rear. And on the bolt is what we call an extractor. So it still has the rim of the cartridge case, the brass part, and it'll help pull the cartridge case out of the gun. And the ejector is also on the bolt face. When it comes back to the rear, the ejector will kick the cartridge case out of the firearm. And these cartridge cases go a little further because that's a lot of powder. It's got quite a bit of energy, so this will probably go about 10 feet.
So explain what we're looking at here. Where's the actual bullet?
Okay, the actual bullet is the orange part. The 5.56, this particular round in this case was a 62 grain, which is, like the 22 long rifle is about 40 grains. Just trying to give you kind of perspective.
The 40 caliber ammunition that we have in this case, how many grains are in those bullets?
That's 165 grains, so it's about a third of that bullet mass. But these come out at a lot higher velocity.
Well, because we've seen in this case injuries caused by rounds this size
Yes.
tend to be much larger than what you'd see from a .40 caliber bullet.
Objection. Sustained.
What causes, if this has less grains of gunpowder in it, what causes it to be considered a high velocity round that's more damaging than a .40 caliber round that has more grains?
Characterization of being more damaging.
Sustained.
Can you explain how this round differs in the speed it travels versus a .40 caliber round?
Okay. The 62 grain bullet that is involved, or that I examined in this particular case, it generally travels out of a 16-inch barrel at about 3,000 feet per second. The Spear Gold Dot that comes out of the 40, like the Glock 22 that I have to show you later, travels at about 1,130 feet per second. So it's a relative thing. Smaller bullet, but traveling really fast versus a larger bullet going relatively slow compared to this.
Now, you said that the speed of sound was around 1,100 feet per second, roughly,
Roughly.
and the bullet is traveling at 3,000 feet per second?
Yes, ma'am.
So you would have heard the bullet, so you wouldn't hear the bullet until after the bullet had traveled.
Right. The bullet's going to cover the distance faster than the sound.
So now, are you able to pull the trigger on this with these dummy rounds in it?
Yes. So the gun is on fire. The safety lever is in that vertical position. Merely just pulling the trigger, which is about 6.5, 7 pounds. That would cause, if this was a live round, cause the round to go down the barrel. The gases would work and would basically drive this bolt carrier. There's a big spring in the back of this stock area. So this would cause it to go to the rear and eject out that cartridge case. Carry handle doesn't go back and forth. The carry handle stays put, but I have to do that to manually work the bolt. So now the bolt flows forward on the next round of ammunition.
And again, do the casings go to the right?
Yes.
How far can a casing from a rifle go?
Asked and answered.
This is with a different weapon, overruled.
No, he just said about 10 feet.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I missed it.
Does it normally go about 10 feet? Can
Yeah,
they go
normally-
further?
It can go further, but typically it's about 10 feet. That's usually how our guys are spaced apart, and usually the guys toward the right get the brass hitting them on the back of the head or whatever.
Now, if you fired the rifle the first time, what do you have to do to fire it a second time?
Second time is release the trigger so the disconnector can reset itself, and then pull the trigger again.
And the same for each consecutive round after that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have to do anything else it'll continue to fire until it either
Right.
is out of ammunition or jams, is that correct?
That is correct. You have to pull and release the trigger each time.
Now, this is a large-looking gun. Is it harder to fire than a handgun?
No, this is actually a pretty easy weapon to fire because you can hold it up to your shoulder very easily, and with a red dot sight, we normally have a red dot sight on here, so you just keep with both eyes open, look at the red dot, superimpose that on where you're going to shoot, and pull the trigger until you stop pulling the trigger.
Does it have a lot of recoil where it's, hitting you in the shoulder as it's firing?
No, this is a very soft recoiling system, and other than the loud muzzle blast, it's very easy, very simple to shoot.
Based on your experience, is it easier to shoot than a handgun?
Objection, relevance.
It's asked and answered. I think you answered that question already, sustained. That's the last and answer.
One second. Now, when we're talking about the casings going 10 feet, that's not how far the bullets are going.
No.
And we've heard from some witnesses in this case who've been in the military who have described M16s. How does this compare to an M16?
Okay, the M16 is the same. It's like the big brother to this. Same parts, same size, same configuration. Some of the internal parts are different that will allow the ability to turn this lever so the little arrows pointing to the back. That will allow the trigger mechanism to override the disconnector, and it's capable of full automatic fire. So if you pull the trigger to the rear and hold it, as long as you can hang on to this thing, it will fire ammunition until you decide to let go of the trigger or run out of ammunition.
Now, is this called an automatic weapon?
No, this is a semi-automatic weapon, so one shot per pull of trigger, so you have to pull it and release for each time you fire a round. The M16, you'd be able to hold down to the rear, and usually you try and control that burst because even with this soft, easy to shoot firearm, you'll get muzzle rise after about 6 or 7 rounds and probably be off target, so you want to control your burst.
What do you mean by muzzle rise?
The front end of the gun, no matter how hard you try or how much you lean into it, you really have to battle this in fully automatic to keep it on target.
Because with the right, you mean the muzzle goes upwards?
Yes,
drifts
the muzzle will
upwards?
tend to drift upward and I think to the left.
The sound, how would the sound of an M16 compare to the sound of the rifle fired in this case?
Oh, they would sound the same. They use the same ammunition. The ammunition in this particular case is military surplus, so it would be the same exact ammunition fired by our troops. It's just that it has the M16 has the ability to rapidly fire multiple rounds versus this one is as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Were you able to determine whether People's Exhibit 706, the rifle in this case, is capable of functioning properly?
Yes, that People's 706 does function properly and is capable of inflicting serious injury or death.
Now, did you also examine handguns in this case?
Yes, I did.
And did you bring a handgun as well?
Yes, I did. Retrieve that one. So. Lots of pouches. Here we go.
And again, is the handgun that you brought fully safe in this courtroom?
Yes, it has a firing pin in it that I broke the tip off of, so it is incapable of firing.
And in this case, we had 2 Glock handguns, People's Exhibits 704, which was previously admitted as the handgun found on the top of the defendant's car,
Okay.
and 705, which was found in the pocket of the car. How do they compare to the handgun that you brought today?
Okay, this is a Glock Model 22, so it matches this particular one with the, I think it's a beam shot laser in the front of it. So it's same design. They have different generations. So this one in the box is actually a newer generation, or the latest generation, where it has a different frame texture and some other improvements. But for all intents and purposes, it's still the same Glock semi-automatic 40 Smith & Wesson caliber firearm.
So now you said Glock and Smith & Wesson in the same sentence. Aren't those 2 different brands of handguns?
Yes, they are 2 different brands, but the round, the 40 caliber round, technically is called the 40 Smith & Wesson.
Okay. So this is the Glock that you brought today is the same as this exhibit, the one that was recovered from the top of the defendant's car?
Yes, it is. It is with a full-size frame, and typically has a magazine that has 15 rounds of 40 capacity.
Did you bring a magazine?
There was one in this when I brought it. I don't know where it's at now. But I also have a 22-round magazine.
And in this case, did you look at some 22-round magazines
Yes, I did.
that were seized in this case?
Yes, I did.
And is this the kind of magazine that you examined from this case?
Yes.
If you could show us how you load one of these magazines.
Okay. I'll have to. So I have more dummy rounds, bright orange plastic tips. These are used to simulate live ammunition. We also stick them in magazines when we're training because this will help the shooters realize that sometimes they're anticipating the shot. So I'm trying to remember to count this time. These also have witness windows on the back, so it'll let you know how you're doing. They don't have to count.
Now, you said that the spring loading these is harder than it is on the magazine for the assault rifle?
Yes, when I get down towards the bottom, I'll really have to lean on this thing to get the last couple of rounds in. Getting there. Two more to go. That's 22.
So it's hard to get the last couple rounds in.
A little harder than I thought.
And is this if it's a new magazine or an older magazine, does that make a difference in terms of how strong the springs are in the magazine?
Yes, it does, and this proves that this is a brand new magazine, and it was very difficult to get that last round in.
Okay. Now, once you've loaded your magazine for your handgun, how do you load the magazine into the handgun?
Okay, this is the easy way. When the slide is locked back to the rear, there's a little lever back here that will help lock the slide to the rear either when you're empty or if you manipulate that with your thumb. Merely just inserting the magazine, the little magazine catch here made a little click. Then there's two ways to do it. You can use this as a release. That'll let the slide go forward, or you can pull it back here like this and do like a slingshot and let it go in. Either way, the round gets in the chamber, and it's best to do that versus riding the slide home because sometimes things don't chamber correctly, so if the gun's back a little bit like that, it won't work.
And when you talked about riding the slide home, you meant hanging on to it the whole time it was coming back forward?
Yes, sometimes people like to keep their hands on the serrated slide and they let it go back and let it go forward.
So now, do you have a round in the chamber?
Yes, so now there would be a round in the chamber. The magazine now has 21 rounds in it, and that would mean 22 pulls of the trigger would empty this gun, and the gun would lock back, or anywhere in between, stop pulling the trigger.
And you would be able to fire the first round, if you can do that for us.
And then the slide would go to the rear. That would go shooting out.
The casing would shoot out and the bullet would go forward.
Correct. The bullet would go forward, the casing would shoot out to the right, and then you'd have to release the trigger and then pull it again.
And you'd be able to continue to fire.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think you can actually, and I was going to ask you too, how fast do the 40 caliber rounds, maybe you already said this, how fast do the 40 caliber rounds travel?
The load that was used was about 1150 maybe feet per second.
A little less than the speed of sound, but pretty close?
Right about there.
Okay. You can go ahead and take a seat again.
Okay. I'll just leave this.
Did you examine both of the handguns in this case, People's Exhibits 704 and 705, and were you able to determine whether they were fully functional?
Yes, both Glock pistols, the 22 and the Model 23, were functional firearms and were both capable of inflicting serious injury or death.
Once you had examined the firearms and test fired them, what did you examine next in this case?
First, I would examine the fired shot shells and the fired cartridge cases that were given to me.
I'm going to hand you six previously admitted shotgun shells. Now, I've handed you six exhibits, 205, 243, 200, 201, 203, and 204 that were previously admitted in this case. Do you recognize those items as items that you examined?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
I have the case number, the item number on both smaller envelopes as well as the evidence items themselves.
And were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether any of these spent shotgun shells were fired from the Remington 870 shotgun?
Yes, I was able to.
And were they in fact all fired from that gun?
Yes, I was able to determine that the 6 fired 12-gauge shot shells were all fired in the 870 that I was examining.
And I believe you previously said, were all of these shot shells, did they all have the same number of BBs in them?
Yes, they're all labeled on the side of what the manufacturer as well as the what was contained within, and they're all marked the same, high velocity, 1,300, indicating the feet per second of the payload, and the weight of the payload, and the fact that they're all steel-sized BBs.
How did you make the determination that these shotgun shells were fired from the shotgun that was seized?
Judge, may we approach?
Yes. All right, the objection is sustained. Ms. Pearson?
Agent Hagashi, was your conclusion that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, those shotgun shells were fired from the shotgun recovered in this case?
Yes, it was.
And how did you make that determination?
It's based on a microscopic comparison of the known exemplars that I generated by test firing the Remington 870 with ammunition that was similar to what was found in this case, and comparing them under the microscope and looking at features around the firing pin impression, in this case called the breech face impression of that shotgun that are impressed onto the surface of the primer mechanism of the fired shot shells. I look at that under my comparison microscope, and that allows me to look at both items through one set of eyepieces, so I can maneuver them both around and examine the same areas on the known exemplars with the evidence and come to my conclusions.
And to be clear, these were all shotgun shells that were collected at the theater that I handed you. You may not know that, but they were previously admitted as that.
Yes, ma'am.
After you examined the shotgun shells, what did you examine next?
Then the 40 Smith & Wesson caliber spear expended cartridge cases from the scene were the next things I examined.
I've handed you 5 spent .40 caliber casings that were recovered in the theater in July of 2012, and they've previously been admitted. Are those items that you examined?
Yes, they are.
And those are our exhibits 564, 578 to 581. Is that 5?
That is correct.
What did you compare them to?
I compared them to the test-fired cartridge cases that I generated from both of the Glock pistols, the Glock 22 as well as the Glock 23.
Were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether any of these 5 spent casings that were found in Theater 9 were fired from either of the Glock pistols?
Yes, I was.
And which pistol did you determine that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty they were fired from?
I was able to determine based on my microscopic comparisons that these 5 casings were all fired in the Glock 22 model pistol.
And the Glock 22, that was the one that had the sight on it?
With the laser on it, correct.
So that was previously admitted in this case as having been seized from the top of the defendant's car.
Judge, I'm just going to object to the continuing testimony by counsel about where items were recovered. That's up to the jury to decide based on the previous testimony.
Sustained.
What did you examine next?
Next in line would be the, I believe it was 66 fired 5.56 caliber cartridge cases.
Okay. I'll take these back from you. Okay. And I've handed you the spent cartridge casings, I think 66 of them.
I believe so.
Are these all spent casings that you examined?
Yes, they all appear to be the ones that I examined in this particular case.
Were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether any of these spent casings were fired from the Smith & Wesson MP-15 rifle?
Yes, I was able to.
And of the 66 that I gave you, were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that all 66 of them were fired from the rifle?
No, 65 of them I was able to identify as being fired in the M&P, the Smith & Wesson rifle. One of them did not retain the marks that I was using for my identification, meaning the firing pin impression that was evident on my test fires that I made from the rifle. On 65 of them, it was in sufficient quality and quantity for me to make an identification. On one of them, I was unable to identify it based on the firing pin impression.
And I believe that the one you were unable to identify is Exhibit 464. Is it at the very end of that group?
Yes, that would be from the very back. That's correct.
Were you able to determine anything about item 464, that it was connected to the rifle in any way?
Yes, this particular item, which is my item number 56, was identified as having been worked through the action of the Smith & Wesson rifle based on the extractor marks that were found on this fired casing, and I compared that to the test-fired rounds that I generated from the Smith & Wesson rifle.
What do you mean by worked through the action of?
Because during the firing process, firearms examiners are able to look at the firing pin impression, because that is a process made, or that is a tool mark made during the firing process. Also, sometimes we use the breech face impression, so just like with the shot shells, the breech of the rifle sometimes yields good enough marks to identify it as being made during the firing process. Those marks weren't present in a quality that I would use for an identification. So I had to look elsewhere on the fired cartridge case in People's 464 for other areas of where that rifle may have come in contact with this casing, because the marks due to firing were not sufficient for me to identify. So I did find an extractor mark on People's 464 that I could identify to the Smith & Wesson rifle. So again, it's a fired casing, but the marks that I was using to identify the fired casings to the rifle were not present on this particular one for some reason, but I was able to identify the extractor mark. So it does have evidence of being in the Smith & Wesson M&P 15, just I couldn't identify it as being fired in.
After you examined all of the spent casings in this case, what did you do next?
The next task, again, I would go with the slightly easier task. There were 2 fired 40 caliber bullets, and that's the next I would go in line for my comparisons.
I think I'm going to go to those later,
Okay.
if that's okay with you.
That's quite all right.
Did you examine the live rounds that were found in the theater?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to hand you some additional exhibits. Well, I'm just going to give you the things in this box. How's that? And I'll take these. Okay. Now, the items in this box, these are going to be the live rounds.
Okay.
So I'll just keep them.
Okay.
I've handed you a number of live rounds of .223 ammo that were previously collected and admitted in this case.
Yes,
If you
did.
can look through those, are all those items that you examined?
Yes, they all appear to be examined live rounds of ammunition that I received.
Now, these live rounds have head stamps on them, and we've noted previously some of them have LC11 and some have LC12.
Correct.
Do you know what that means?
Yes, I do.
What does it mean?
The military rounds are marked with where they're made and the date, typically, is to differentiate them from commercial rounds, which would have like federal and the caliber designation. Since this is military rounds, they're marked much simpler. So this, the LC denotes Lake City. That's the armorer or armory that made these particular rounds, and then the date, August 11 or 2012. Those are stamped on the bottom, and I believe there's also a NATO head stamp on that, so it would denote, again, a military round.
When you refer to a military round, what do you mean?
Again, these are made for the military, and the first run ammunition would probably go out directly to our troops, where a surplus round may hit the civilian market because specifications may not be right, or they just may be in excess, so they get released to be sold to the general public.
The rounds that we have in this case have green tips.
Yes, they do.
Does the green tip mean something?
Yes, for the military round, this would denote it's a M855 round, meaning it's a 62 grain 5.56 round. It's got a little steel penetrator in it that would help when this round is fired at a greater range to help penetrate like a Kevlar helmet or something that our troops might face in the battlefield. So it's an enhanced round versus the old stuff that they used to use that was just a copper jacket with a lead core. So this has a little steel penetrator, a little heavier grain weight to help it sustain some energy down 300, 400, 500 yards downrange.
When you were examining live ammunition, did you find any bullets that showed evidence of feeding malfunctions?
Yes, I did. I did find 3 rounds that were not normal. It looked like there was some damage caused to the sides of them based on just a eyeball exam, and that indicated to me that there was some sort of feeding issues with those particular rounds where they would not go from whatever magazine they were in properly into the chamber of the M&P rifle.
And did I hand you the three bullets that you found that showed evidence of feeding malfunctions?
Yes, you did.
And those are all items you examined as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to give these to Ms. Huntsman to show on the Elmo, so we can... And we are looking at, which exhibit number is this? 576? And if we can sharpen up the bullet as much as we can, if you're able to show us on this round what evidence you see of a feeding malfunction.
Okay, this particular round was especially bad.
If you're going to stand up, if you'd then turn the microphone, or let me give you the handheld mic.
You know, if I can turn this one back on. I have this one. Here we go, Karen.
So it's right in front of me, right? Oh, if it's a snake, it would have bit me. Or you can use it.
Okay, this particular round had obvious damage that the bullet has been pushed back into the cartridge case here, and on one of the sides it actually has a flattened area, a gouge. So that to me indicates, one, to push a bullet back like that, one of two things. Either it tried to get chambered into the chamber of the rifle when there's already a round in it that would cause the bullet to get pushed back so severely, or if it didn't go up the feed ramps properly and maybe engaged one of the parts of the barrel extension that help that thing lock up properly. If the round is misfed and slingshotted in, or even under normal fire, the bolt is coming forward pretty quickly. So that could also cause that bullet to be pushed back if it hit one of the parts of the barrel extension, or basically a part it wasn't supposed to hit. It's supposed to go directly up one of the feed ramps into the chamber. It helps because back here, this is about a little more than a third of an inch. The bullet diameter is .22, so it's going to naturally feed in fairly simply, except when you have a problem with the feeding process, whether it's a magazine. Usually it's a magazine-induced problem. So this round either engaged part of the barrel that it wasn't supposed to, or there was already a round in the chamber and it can't occupy that space. So that could cause the bullet to get pushed back in the casing. So again, if it's a double feed where this is behind a round that's already in the chamber, the bolt mechanism is going to be severely back. Obviously won't be able to fire, and that has to be cleared out. That malfunction would have to be cleared out probably by removing the magazine to get not only this round out, but also the round out that's in the chamber. So it would take a lot of effort on the part of the operator to get that magazine out, the bolt lock to the rear, clear the rounds that haven't fed properly, and then insert a new magazine to get it in a firing position.
And if we could see the other two. This is Exhibit 566.
Okay, this one is my item 75, as you can see from the number there. This one too had damage to one of the shoulders, again indicating it had a problem going up the feed ramps, and I show you on the rifle, but there's two feed ramps on either side, just like the magazine staggered. So that's designed to go up these ramps and in properly. This one obviously had some problems on the shoulder area where it may have been tried to be manually fed into the chamber, and again it didn't quite make it, so it was on the ground. So that is indication of a problem.
And the third one, please.
And this one too, one of these had a deep gouge in the shoulder area, and that's something that I experienced when I test fired the rifle with one of the magazines. The bullet didn't quite make it up and into the ramp, and when the bolt came forward, it forced part of the body of the cartridge case into one of the locking mechanisms on the barrel extension, causing it to basically lock up. So there was damage on this live ammunition to indicate that it didn't feed up into the ramp properly. So those were just noted that these rounds didn't make it into the chamber properly, and there was some damage.
You can take that down. Was the live ammunition that you looked at, that was what we've been calling the 223 or the 5.56 ammunition, was it consistent with the kind of ammunition that you would fire from the rifle that was collected in this case?
Yes, all the ammunition that I examined was either Lake City 2011 or Lake City 2012 ammunition, and all had the green tip.
Did you look at live ammunition that was 40 caliber as well?
Yes, I did.
And in addition to what I've handed you, I think we have more in magazines. And was all of the 40 caliber ammunition that you looked at consistent with the kind of ammunition that you would fire from the handguns that were seized in this case?
Yes, this particular round, my item number 83 was an intact, unfired 40 Smith & Wesson caliber gold dot ammunition.
Now, the gold dot ammunition, were they hollow points or not?
Yes, gold dots are hollow point ammunition.
Explain what a hollow point is.
A hollow point has a hollow cavity in the front, and it's best used for self-defense or police use because once it impacts soft tissue, it's designed to disrupt the front end or mushroom, become a larger frontal area, and not penetrate, or basically not over-penetrate. The thing with handgun ammunition, we want to try and get at least 12 inches of penetration. So we can test this stuff into 10% gelatin to simulate tissue simulant, so we can have the bullets, or the bullet designers will attempt to make a design that will function in this gelatin. They'll also put barriers in front of it because we've learned a lot throughout the years of different police shootings that what is required with handgun ammunition.
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance at this point.
Sustained. Ask your next question, please.
The ammunition that you looked at that was all 40 caliber, was all of it hollow point ammunition?
Yes, it was.
Now, did you also look at some additional 12-gauge shotgun shells?
Yes, I did.
The shells that have previously been admitted as People's Exhibit 691, and if you can just hold them up so that the jury can see them, they're red as opposed to the green spent shells.
Yes.
Does that indicate something significant?
Mostly a different manufacturer, but on the sides of these, it'll say these are Ranger double-aught buck low recoil shot shells.
Explain what double-aught buck means.
Double-aught buck means the size of the shot that's contained within. These would be .32 diameter pellets in the low recoil stuff. There's 8 of them, and they go out lower velocity. I'm not sure the velocity that's normally advertised, but this is a typical load that a police officer might use in their 12-gauge shotgun because you have 8 pellets of great size that can help stay on target. Again, we don't want to get too far away when we deploy these in our shotguns, but they're very effective close range.
Now, you said there are 8 pellets in this compared to the 100 pellets, shot pellets that were in the green rounds that you examined.
Yes, the green rounds had 100.17 diameter pellets. These are 8.32 diameter lead pellets.
And could these red shotgun shells be fired from the rifle that was, or the shotgun that was seized in this case?
Yes, these will fit and function in the 870 shotgun.
Did you also look at the magazines that were collected in this case?
Yes, I did.
I've handed you a number of magazines that have been previously admitted in this case. Some of them are in a box in a large exhibit with multiple magazines, and then some of them are more singly located there. Did you examine all of these?
Yes, I did.
Were these all magazines that are consistent with the kinds of magazines that you would use with the rifle in this case?
Yes, with the rifle, and I believe I had some pistol, the 22-round pistol magazines also.
First, looking at and I think I've just handed you the 223 magazines.
Okay.
I think that's right. If you can take a look at those, and were you able to determine if all of these were functional or if any of them had any kind of malfunctions?
Most of the, there were, I believe, 4 steel magazines that were supposed to hold 40 rounds. Most of those did have some sort of malfunction with me. One of them, actually, the top end of it was so distorted it wouldn't even fit in the well of the rifle, so that one I couldn't even test fire. The magazine lips on some of these, the steel ones I'm talking about, were deformed.
And I'll take one and I'll put one
Okay.
that has some damage over on the Elmo. If we could see the exhibit number, please, which should be at the top. And that is Exhibit 256. And if you could show us, I guess, the top of the magazine, or, on the end. Dale, if you can show us what would be helpful.
So up here in this region, this is where the feed lips, the magazine feed lips are, and those are very important in the proper feeding of the ammunition that's contained within to make it work properly in the rifle. The back area of most of these ones that are steel, the one that I brought is aluminum. A couple of the other ones that are brought are aluminum. Those are basically like government issue type magazines. They tend to work the best. This 40 rounder is, again, I guess bigger is better, but in this case the material being steel suffered some damage back here. I don't know when they were probably dropped onto this surface, causing some damage here. So when loaded, they wouldn't hold 40 rounds because the back end of here was crushed. So with 38 or 39 rounds in it, the attitude of the bullet is supposed to be somewhat level with this. Most of these, the bullet would be pointing up, so that would indicate you would have problems making that gun function properly with the altitude of the round not being in the right configuration. So again, there's some wiggle room in how these magazines will function, but most of the steel ones that I examined wouldn't chamber around with even less than capacity, just based on the damage to the magazine lips up here to where it wouldn't feed that first round properly.
What would cause the magazine lips to become damaged?
The back end of the magazine here appeared to be peened, or basically hit the deck, and if they were fully loaded or close to being fully loaded, I think 30 rounds of ammunition or 40 rounds of ammunition is probably close to another pound with the heavier magazine. If it falls on that, there's a good chance it might get damaged enough to where it would cause a problem like this. So I don't know if they were damaged previous or having been dropped in the theater. So I can't say when they were damaged, but they were damaged when I received them.
You said that these were steel magazines. Were some of the magazines not made of steel that you examined?
Yes, some I believe I had 2 of them that were regular aluminum magazines, and the drum magazine.
If you could find Exhibit 259.
And Ms. Pearson, when you get to a good stopping point, let me know.
Okay. Did you want to stop right at 5, or did you want to go a
You
few?
can go for, if you want to go for a couple more minutes, I'm fine doing that.
Okay. Now, Was this a magazine that you found malfunctioned or had damage to it? And I
Yes.
think, do we need the other? Are you able to tell from that angle what the issue was with this magazine?
Yes, with this particular magazine, this was my item number 228. This one had severe damage up here in the magazine lips area to where it wouldn't even fit in the well. So the damage this one sustained was basically made it unusable.
Was this also a steel magazine?
Yes, it was.
And you should have there Exhibit 265, the drum magazine.
Yes, there's the drum.
Now, did that operate the way it was supposed to when you tested it?
Well, it worked how I expected it to. I used it to test fire the firearm in the laboratory, so I was able to get 2 rounds, enough for the function test and getting the rounds for my exemplar collection. But I did take this out to the range, loaded up with 100 rounds, and at round 39, I experienced a malfunction where the round started to go up the feed ramp, but the bolt came forward on it. So these are prone to have feeding problems, and that's what I experienced when I test fired it with loaded to full capacity.
How do you clear a jam from a drum magazine if that's what you're using?
With this particular one, I had to remove the magazine from the rifle, take the round that was pinned up against the barrel extension and the bolt, remove that from the mechanism, and then reinsert the magazine and let the bolt go forward. And then I was able to fire the rest of the rounds normally.
Is the kind of malfunction that you experienced with the drum magazine something that in your experience is common in a magazine of this kind?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
Yes, it is. Because it's a much more complicated system than just the normal follower with the spring pushing it up. It's got dual springs on each side. It's kind of like a on-ramp in Los Angeles County where 2 people are trying to go occupy the same space. Well, you can't have that with the feeding problems. Sometimes the rounds will get stuck in this middle area here and not go up to where they're supposed to be. So,
how does this magazine work? I mean, it's round, so obviously the bullets aren't coming straight up, but how do they feed?
okay, there's 50 or
And I don't know if you can put it on the front of the
okay.
table perhaps.
It's a 100-round capacity. There's a bunch of chain-linked dummy rounds that help push the ammunition from each of the drums into this collection point. So the drum winds up, holds probably close to 50 rounds on each side for the 100-round capacity. You push them down just like I loaded the other one. It's just that they have to, one side has to go, then the other side has to go, and they have to play nice. And typically they don't play nice, where a round somewhere in this may get jammed up, and then you'll have a void where one side may feed and the other side won't. So there's just it's just too complicated to work reliably.
And you indicated you also examined some .40 caliber magazines?
Yes, I did.
Were the Glock, are all of these Glock magazines?
Yes, all the pistol magazines were Glock original equipment magazines.
And were the magazines that you looked at, are they consistent with the kind of magazines and ammo that you would use in the handguns that were collected in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see evidence of the malfunctions that you saw in some of the steel magazines for the rifle in any of these .40 caliber magazines?
No, none of these appeared to have any feeding issues or any problems.
This would be a good place to stop, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, members of the jury, it's 5:05, so we are going to go ahead and adjourn for the day. I want to remind you that you may not discuss any aspect of the case with each other. I know that it may be tempting at times during the breaks to want to talk about the case, but you have to resist that temptation. You can talk about other things if you wish. I want you to be friendly with each other, but you cannot talk about the case. You cannot talk to anyone else about the case. All you can tell people is that you're a juror in a trial in Arapahoe County, and we anticipate the trial will end in August or September. Please do not talk to any witnesses, parties, or attorneys about anything. To make sure that witnesses, parties, and attorneys do not talk to you, make sure that you wear your juror badge at all times and that it is visible to all those around you. Having your juror badge on will also reduce the risk that people will talk about the case in your presence. But even if despite your best efforts, let's say you're doing everything right, you're doing everything I've asked you to do, you still happen to overhear someone talking about the case, whether it's an attorney, a witness, a person from the public, a person from the media, another juror, you have to let my staff know that you have heard, that you need to talk to me. Don't say what it's about, just say you need to talk to me. So if you happen to overhear or hear something about the case from anyone else, then you need to let my staff know about that. And if that has happened throughout this trial, you need to let my staff know that. Please do not talk to any members of the media about anything. You must not read, view, or listen to any news or media reports that may refer to the case. Remember that there is media coverage of the trial, and so you need to be very, very careful. I've indicated to you that the best and safest course of action is to just avoid news reports or media reports. I know how hard that is, but it's frankly the best thing to do. If you happen to be watching the news or listening to the radio and a story comes on about the case, change the channel or change the station. On the internet, same thing, and it can be tricky because something may come up about the case in a headline and you need to immediately avoid reading it, and so you need to be ready for it and you need to be on guard to do that quickly so that you avoid reading it. And that applies to social media. That applies to any other part of the internet. That applies to any media whatsoever. And it applies to all means of communication. You have to avoid obtaining any information about the case from outside sources. Remember that sometimes the attorneys and I are having discussions outside your presence. If you go and get some of that information that's reported from the media, from an outside source, then what's the point of having the discussion outside your presence? That would defeat the point. The whole point is the law requires that I have certain conversations outside your presence, and so you need to be careful about media reports that may be out there, and that includes social media. I know that people sometimes use Facebook, but sometimes you'll see headlines or you'll see news reports, and that jeopardizes your ability to make sure that you do not see, hear, or read any information about the case from any media report. You cannot visit any locations mentioned in the case or conduct your own investigation outside the courtroom. You cannot start forming any opinions about the case. You must keep an open mind throughout the trial. Neither sympathy nor prejudice for the prosecution or the defendant may affect any of your decisions in this case. Remember that the attorneys have a job to do, and sometimes they're required to make objections and ask to have bench conferences. Don't hold it against them if they do. Please don't infer from my rulings that I'm for one side or the other, or that I like one side. better than the other. I'm neutral in these proceedings. I'm doing my best to apply the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law. I added to the advisements earlier that you cannot have any contact with the jurors who are no longer on this trial. So some of you may have become friends or acquaintances with them, and you may be tempted to want to talk about what happened or to just say hello. You need to avoid that. It is an advisement now that I'm giving you, an admonishment that you have to follow, that you cannot have any contact with any of those jurors, but through any means, whether in person, email, phone, social media, text, any means whatsoever, no contact whatsoever, whether it's about this case or something else. You cannot have any contact until these proceedings are over. Does everybody understand all the advisements? Yes. All right, and everybody's saying yes. Listen, I know what I'm asking you is not easy, but we didn't just grab the first folks that we found. We took our time selecting a jury because we knew that this would be difficult, and we knew that we would be asking a lot. And as you know, we started this process months and months ago. If even one of you fails to follow a single advisement, it can create a lot of problems. So please make sure you follow each and every one of these advisements. All right? Thank you, folks. Have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you. Please be seated, everyone. Agent Higashi, you're free to go. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow morning. You're not free to go. You're free to go for the night.
For the night, yes.
So we'll see you tomorrow morning. Your subpoena is continued until tomorrow, okay? All right. I just want to follow up on the last bench conference that we had with Ms. Pearson and Mr. King. Ms. Pearson was right, and I was wrong. She asked the question by including the language to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. She asked, and were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty whether any of these spent shotgun shells were fired from the Remington A70 shotgun? That was the first question that she asked in terms of opinions about matching shotgun shells with actual firearms. The next question was, and were they in fact all fired from that gun? And that's the one that I think Mr. King and I were focusing on. That question did not include the language to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, but the one immediately preceding that one had made it clear that she was asking a question and asking whether the witness had an opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. And then after that, pursuant to my instruction, Ms. Pearson included that language in her questions. Obviously, Mr. King will have an opportunity on cross-examination to clarify that, and he should if he wants to. He'll have a chance to do that. But I just wanted to make that record because when we were at the bench, she said she had included that language, and Mr. King and I didn't remember that language, and so I wanted to explain that. By the way, right after that question that I read a moment ago, and the answer was yes, I was able to, and then that was the answer to the question that included the language to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. And then the next question was, and were they in fact all fired from that gun? And then Agent Higashi gave an answer to that. There were no more questions that were answered before the bench conference that did not include that language to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. The bench conference took place, I think, when the next question was posed, but before the agent could answer it. And when the next question, I mean the next question that asked about comparing shotgun shells to a firearm. Before that next question about that subject matter was answered, the objection was made and we had the bench conference. And after that, pursuant to my instruction, Ms. Pearson was careful to include that language in all her questions. And then I don't remember any other objections with respect to that. So I wanted to clarify that. Is there anything that we need to talk about at this time on behalf of the prosecution? Ms. Pearson?
Your Honor.
Is there anything that we need to talk about at this time on behalf of the defense, Mr. King? Or Ms. Brady?
Yes, Your Honor. I just want to give the court a heads up that Ms. Teach McGuire showed me an exhibit that they intend to use. It'll be exhibit number 649, and it is a series of Gmail chats. And I just wanted to let the court know that I do intend to object to all but one of the Gmail chats, and I would not object if the court wanted to look at those before the witness testifies.
All right. And is that okay with the people if I review that?
It is, Your Honor. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
And this is exhibit P-TR-649?
Yes, sir.
And these are Gmail Gmail chats between who?
James. Oh, that's right. James Holmes and Gargi Dada.
Okay. And the basis of the objection?
I'm going to object to all of them except for the last one, Your Honor. The last one is dated March 25th of 2012. The court's heard testimony about the chat where they discuss human capital, so I understand the relevance of that chat. The others I will object under Rules 401, 403, and 802.
All right, and the people's response to the objection?
Your Honor, in this case, it's very similar to the response that we've given to the emails as well. This is even more different than the emails in that these are Gmail chats that took place over an even shorter period of time between two people who had a completely different relationship over the period of time in question than the defendant had with his parents, with people from the school. This encompasses a far more candid, I think, an intimate look at how the defendant was functioning over, I think it goes back to no earlier than maybe October. I could be wrong on that. 1 second, Your Honor.
It looks like the first one is October 10, 2011.
That's right, Your Honor. I see that too. So it really covers about a 5-month period of time. I think it also serves to put into context that email that the defendant wants to have before the jury in terms of the topics that they had discussed previously. I don't think it's hearsay to the extent that it's the defendant's statements under 801, to the extent that the conversation with Gargi is in there. I think those statements only serve to put into context, just like we've done with the emails, the statements of the defendant. Otherwise, I'd rely upon the arguments that we've made on the emails as well.
Are you at this time intending to call Gargi Dada as a witness?
Yes, sir. That's how we're going to get the foundation to get these admitted.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'll take a look at it, and then I'll give you a ruling probably tomorrow, okay? All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you for bringing it up to my attention. I appreciate that.
Your Honor, one thing. If
Yeah.
I could tender to the court C-TR-52, which is the demonstrative exhibit that I used.
You want to mark it? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, the court will be in recess. Thank you.
Please rise.